Name's Jake. I'm 34. Nothing too flashy, just an average guy. Medium height, dark hair, brown eyes. Nothing that stands out in a crowd. Not saying I'm bad-looking or anything, but I'm definitely not the type to end up on the cover of Men's Health. Not that I ever thought it mattered much. My wife, Lauren, used to feel the same way, or at least that's what I believed. We'd been married about 5 years, and life was rolling along just fine. My career was on an upward track. We had a solid savings account, a nice house, and plenty of plans for the future. Everything felt steady, predictable. Lauren, though, she's the kind of woman people notice. Tall, blonde, striking blue eyes. Elegant in a way that makes heads turn when she walks into a room. Not that she ever seemed to care about that kind of attention. At least, if she did, she never let it show. Then came the night everything took a turn. It started at a buddy's birthday party. One of those laid-back gatherings where the wine flows a little too freely, and the conversations start drifting into weird territory as the night stretches on. We were all lounging in a circle, chatting about future plans, dreams, careers, even kids. Just the usual kind of talk. And that's when Lauren dropped it. "I'd want my kid to be from another man," she said, casual as anything. The whole room went dead silent for a beat. My brain stalled like it was trying to reboot. Did she really just say that? Before I could fully process it, Lauren let out a nervous laugh and waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, I didn't mean it like that. Just joking. I mean, imagine if we had a baby with Scandinavian genes. Blonde hair, blue eyes. He'd probably look like a supermodel, right?" A few people chuckled, but it was the kind of laughter that comes with sideways glances and raised eyebrows. Even I wasn't sure how to react, so I did what seemed easiest. I joked back. "Sure, and let's throw in some Viking strength while we're at it," I said, forcing a grin. People laughed, the conversation moved on, and that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. That comment dug its way into my brain and refused to leave. At first, I brushed it off as a dumb joke, just something blurted out after a few too many drinks. But later that night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. Why the hell would she even say something like that? I had no idea that this was just the tip of the iceberg. At the time, I figured it was a one-off, something weird that would never come up again. Turns out I was dead wrong. That party was just the start of something bigger. Over the next few days, Lauren started dropping little comments that felt off. At first, they seemed harmless, just random observations. But they kept piling up. We'd be watching TV, and she'd point out some actor and say, "You think that jawline is all genetics? Or does he spend 20 hours a week in the gym?" Or, "Wow, look at those eyes. Imagine having a kid with eyes like that." First, I shrugged it off. People talk about celebrities all the time. Nothing weird about that, right? But then it wasn't just famous people. It was random guys in real life. Like, we'd be grocery shopping, and she'd lean in and whisper, "That guy's gotta be over 6 feet tall. Think he's Scandinavian?" They always have that height advantage. I let out a nervous chuckle. "What's with you and Scandinavians all of a sudden?" Lauren smirked but didn't answer. I tried to ignore it. Everyone gets weird little obsessions sometimes. Some people go on health kicks. Others get hooked on conspiracy theories or binge-watch documentaries on space travel. I figured this was just a passing phase. Except it wasn't. One night over dinner, she casually mentioned she'd been reading up on genetics, something about a blog or a TikTok influencer who talked about the science of optimal gene combinations. I nearly choked on my pasta. "Optimal genes? Are you serious?" I asked, shooting her a look. She didn't even hesitate. "Yeah, it's fascinating. There are actual studies that show how certain traits can set people up for success. Like, taller men tend to earn more money, and people with symmetrical faces are perceived as more trustworthy." I stared at her, trying to gauge if she was messing with me. "Okay, but what does that have to do with us? Pretty sure we're doing fine without any genetic superiority nonsense." She let out an exasperated sigh, like I was missing something obvious. "Jake, I just want the best for our future kids. Don't you?" I sat there, unsure whether to laugh or argue. In the end, I did neither. I just changed the subject. But deep down, something about the way she said it, The certainty in her voice, like she was stating a simple fact, unsettled me. And that was when I started to realize this wasn't just some harmless curiosity. It was something else entirely. A few weeks later, things took a turn for the worse. Lauren's curiosity had morphed into something far more intense. She was glued to her phone for hours, scrolling through articles, watching interviews with so-called genetics experts, and diving deep into studies on inheritance patterns. She even started digging into her own ancestry, excitedly telling me about her Scandinavian roots like she'd just uncovered some royal lineage. Then, one night, she hit me with another curveball. We were watching a movie, nothing serious, just unwinding, when she suddenly blurted out, "I've been thinking. We really need to consider how genetics will shape our kids' future." I frowned and set down the remote. "Lauren, what the hell are you talking about?" "I'm just saying," she replied, her voice perfectly calm, like we were discussing what to have for dinner. "We need to be smart about this. If we want our kids to have the best start in life, we should aim for the strongest gene pool possible." I stared at her, completely floored. "You make it sound like we're breeding show dogs," I said, my tone sharp. "Where is this coming from?" She crossed her arms and gave me that look. The one that said, "You're just not seeing the bigger picture." "Jake, this isn't about you," she said, as if that was supposed to make me feel better. "It's about giving our kids the best shot at life. People with strong genetics have an advantage from day one." A knot formed in my stomach. "So what, you're saying my genes aren't good enough?" Her eyes widened slightly, like she hadn't realized how messed up that sounded. No, that's not what I mean. You're smart, responsible, good-looking. It's not about you." She hesitated, then added, "It's just, the world is competitive and I worry." "Worry about what, exactly?" I cut in. "That our kids wouldn't be tall enough to make the NBA? That they wouldn't be walking Calvin Klein ads?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, and that's when it really hit me. This wasn't a passing phase. This wasn't something she'd move on from after a couple of blog posts and YouTube videos. She actually believed this. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me, completely unbothered. How the hell was I supposed to deal with this? How do you argue with someone who's convinced your future kids need to look like they belong on a magazine cover? Things were unraveling fast, and I was right in the middle of the mess. The following weeks were absolute hell. Lauren's obsession went from background noise to full-blown insanity. Every conversation, no matter how normal it started, somehow circled back to genetics. I couldn't even take a simple walk in the park without her making weird comments. "Look at that couple," she murmured one afternoon, nodding toward a tall, blonde man pushing a stroller next to his equally tall, blonde wife. "Bet their kids are going to grow up to be CEOs or pro athletes." I rolled my eyes. "Oh, right, because hair color determines success now." She ignored my sarcasm, staring at them like they were part of some experiment she was analyzing. And it wasn't just her words that were changing. Lauren herself was different, colder, more distant. She stopped reaching for my hand like she used to. The woman who once curled up next to me on the couch during movie nights barely looked at me now. And when she did acknowledge me, it was often with backhanded comments and snide remarks. One night we were arguing, something stupid, probably about what to order for dinner, when she snapped, "Maybe if you weren't so average, you'd understand how important this is." I froze. "Excuse me?" My voice was low, dangerous. "Average? That's what you think of me now." She bit her lip, like she knew she'd crossed a line, but it was already out there. "Jake, I didn't mean it like that. You know what I'm trying to say." "No." I shot back, my tone sharp. "I really don't. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you regret marrying someone who isn't a 6-foot-tall Viking." She let out a long sigh, arms crossed tight over her chest. I'm scared. Okay? Scared that our kids won't have the same opportunities as other people's. Life is already hard enough." I laughed short, humorless. "Lauren, our kids will have everything that actually matters. Love, support, stability. But you're stuck on this crazy idea that genetics are some kind of cheat code to life." The silence between us was heavy. She didn't argue anymore that night. But she didn't let it go either. I could tell. She wasn't done with this. Not even close. And me? I was caught between two urges. Either shaking some sense into her or just walking out and never looking back. And somehow it still got worse. Lauren started pulling away. Like she'd already made up her mind that I wasn't genetically fit enough for her future kids. She threw out statistics like they were the undeniable truth, how taller men supposedly earn more, how people with symmetrical features are automatically seen as more trustworthy. It was exhausting. One night I finally had enough. I turned to her and laid it all out. Let me get this straight. You don't think I'm good enough to be the father of your kids because I'm not tall and blonde? Why the hell did you even marry me, Lauren? She hesitated, her expression softening for the first time in weeks. Jake, that's not what I'm saying. You're a good man. You're responsible. And I love you. But this isn't about us. It's about our future. Wow. So I was good enough to be her husband, but not good enough to father her children? That hit like a punch to the gut. I shook my head, feeling the anger rise inside me. You're out of your damn mind. That night, I didn't even bother climbing into bed next to her. I grabbed a pillow, crashed on the couch, and spent the next few hours staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how the hell we got here. This wasn't the woman I married. The woman I married didn't give a damn about shallow nonsense like this. Now it felt like I was living with a stranger. And for the first time, a thought crossed my mind. Maybe this was it. Maybe we had finally hit the point of no return. The breaking point. Lauren wasn't even pretending to hide her obsession anymore. She talked about ideal genetics like it was just a casual topic of conversation, something as normal as discussing weekend plans. And then came the night she crossed the final line. We were sitting in the living room, barely speaking. I was flipping through channels, doing my best to avoid another argument, when she turned to me with that same calculating look she'd been wearing for weeks. Jake, I've been thinking. I muted the TV, already bracing myself. Thinking about what? She hesitated just for a second. Then she said it. Maybe we should look into sperm donation. From someone with ideal traits. I blinked. For a moment, I thought I must have misheard her. What the hell did you just say? Don't get upset, she rushed to say, like she knew exactly how insane it sounded. I'm just suggesting we explore all our options. I could feel my blood pressure spike. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to keep myself from exploding. Options? You mean replacing me? You're actually suggesting we have a kid with some random guy's DNA instead of mine? Do you even hear yourself right now? She sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. Jake, calm down. It's not like I'm saying I want to sleep with someone else. It's just a medical procedure. Well, that makes it so much better. I let out a sharp laugh and threw up my hands. Great. Thanks for the clarification, Lauren. That really clears things up. It's so much more comforting to know you just want a designer baby instead of one with my inferior genes. She crossed her arms, frustration flickering in her eyes. You're twisting my words. You refuse to understand where I'm coming from. No, I understand exactly where you're coming from, I snapped. You've decided I'm not good enough. That our kids need some kind of genetic upgrade because the idea of them looking like me is just too much for you to handle. She rolled her eyes, exasperated. You're being dramatic. I let out a bitter laugh. Dramatic? Lauren, for months you've been obsessing over this. You compare me to strangers in the grocery store, throw out statistics like I'm some failed science experiment, and now you're actually suggesting I get replaced by a damn sperm donor. If anyone's being dramatic, it's you. She stood up, her eyes locked onto mine. I'm not trying to hurt you, Jake. I just want to make sure our children have the best opportunities. Why can't you see that? Because you've lost your mind, I yelled, the words ripping out of me before I could stop them. You've let this fantasy consume you, and you don't even realize how much damage you're doing. Do you even care how I feel? For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Something like guilt. But it was too late. I couldn't unhear what she'd said. I couldn't unfeel the weight of it. That night, I couldn't stay in the house. I needed to breathe. Without another word, I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and left her standing alone in the living room. I drove around aimlessly, my thoughts spinning out of control. This wasn't just some stupid argument that would blow over in a few days. This was a crack running straight through the foundation of our marriage, one I wasn't sure we could ever patch up. By the time I made it back home a few hours later, Lauren was waiting for me. She looked drained, like she hadn't stopped thinking about our fight either. But her expression was unreadable. "Are you going to stay out all night from now on?" she asked quietly. I didn't even hesitate. "I'm thinking about it," I said, my voice cold. I brushed past her without another word and went straight to the spare bedroom. I was done. Done with the conversations. Done with the statistics. Done with feeling like I wasn't enough. The next few days were nothing but silence. We barely spoke. I could tell Lauren was confused, maybe even hurt. But at that point, I just didn't care anymore. I was mentally checked out. Every time I looked at her, all I could hear was that damn conversation playing over and over in my head. The fact that she had even considered using a sperm donor was a slap in the face. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep living like this. The decision was made, even if it felt like I was swallowing glass just thinking about it. And sure enough, it was only a matter of time before everything exploded again. The final blow. Lauren, as usual, didn't seem to grasp how far she'd pushed me. She thought this was just another rough patch. Just another fight we'd get over. But for me, this was the cliff. And I'd already gone over the edge. There was no coming back. One night, after another long stretch of cold silence, she decided to bring it up again. We were sitting at the dining table, picking at our food in near total silence, when she finally spoke. "I think we need to be practical about this, Jake," she said softly, like she was afraid I'd snap. I set my fork down and looked at her. "Practical about what, exactly?" She let out a sigh, rubbing her temples like I was the difficult one. "About children. About how we move forward." She hesitated, then pressed on. "I know you hate the idea of sperm donation, so I've been looking into other options." A bad feeling twisted in my gut. "What kind of options?" "Calm down," she said quickly, like she knew how this was going to sound. "I'm just talking hypothetically. I read about how some couples use surrogates, or sometimes they meet people who are willing to help in non-traditional ways." My pulse pounded in my ears. "Non-traditional ways? You mean finding some guy to—" "No," she cut me off, shaking her head fast. "Of course not. I'm not suggesting anything like that. But some people explore alternatives. You have to admit, it's something worth discussing." I just stared at her. "Lauren, are you seriously sitting here, at our dinner table, suggesting that we find some other man to help make a baby?" Her mouth opened, then shut again. Then, she let out a nervous laugh and waved a hand, like she could just erase what she'd said. "You're overreacting. It was just a thought." "Oh, just a thought?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "You think I'm going to sit here and listen to you brainstorm ways to replace me as the father of our kids? Jesus, Lauren, I'm done." "Jake, wait," she said quickly, her eyes going wide. "You don't mean that." I leveled her with a look. "I do," I said, my voice firm. "I've been done for a while. You've been pushing and pushing, and I let it slide, thinking you'd snap out of it. But you haven't. You've driven me to my breaking point with this genetic fantasy. I don't even recognize you anymore." She stood up too, stepping toward me. "Jake, come on. You can't just walk away over a misunderstanding." "This isn't a misunderstanding," I snapped. "You've been chipping away at me for months, comparing me to strangers, making me feel like I'm not good enough, acting like I'm just some placeholder for your dream genes. And now you want to talk about alternatives?" I shook my head. "Screw that. I'm done being your science experiment." Her face twisted in frustration. "Don't you think you're being selfish?" she fired back, her voice sharper now. "You're making this all about your feelings instead of thinking about our future family." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, I'm selfish? That's rich. Coming from the woman who wants to Frankenstein the perfect baby out of a damn sperm bank catalog." Her expression hardened. You're impossible. And you're delusional, I shot back. I grabbed my bag and slung it over my shoulder. Enjoy your perfect future, Lauren. But it won't be with me. I walked toward the door. She followed, her voice trembling with disbelief. But I was already gone. Jake, wait. You don't have to do this. Let's talk. I'm done talking, I said, cutting her off without even glancing back. All you care about is this fantasy of a perfect family. Newsflash, Lauren, there's no such thing. You threw away what we had, chasing something that doesn't even exist. I got in my car and drove off without another word. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be there anymore. A few hours later, my phone rang. I let it buzz a couple of times before I picked up. What do you want? I asked, my voice flat. Where are you? She asked softly. Are you coming home? I sighed, gripping the steering wheel tighter. No, Lauren. I'm not coming home, I said firmly. I need space. I need time to think. And honestly, so do you. She was quiet for a second before she said, Jake, I don't understand why you're so angry. I thought we were just having a rational conversation. Jesus Christ. I groaned, rubbing a hand down my face. You still don't get it, do you? You've been tearing me down for months, comparing me to some imaginary dream man, making me feel like I'm not enough. How the hell do you not see how damaging that is? A long silence stretched between us. Then, in a whisper, she said, I didn't mean to hurt you. Well, you did, I replied, my voice cold. Look, I'm done arguing. We're not even on the same page anymore. Hell, we're not even in the same damn book. That was the last real conversation we ever had. The end of us. The next day, I called a lawyer. Lauren was still in shock. I don't think she even tried to fight it. Probably too busy convincing herself that I was the one who'd lost my mind. But the truth? I was finally taking my life back. The divorce process moved fast. Too fast, maybe. Lauren barely put up a fight. She didn't drag things out or make the asset division complicated. It was like she couldn't even process that this was really happening. Meanwhile, I kept my focus locked in. Meetings with my lawyer, moving my money into my own account, finding a new place to stay. She reached out once or twice, but it was awkward and pointless. The last time she called, she said, Jake, I think you're overreacting. Maybe you're just stressed out. We can figure this out together. I almost laughed at how delusional that sounded. Lauren, I'm not stressed, I told her. I'm done. We're too far gone. You've made it painfully clear that I don't fit into your plan anymore. And I can't be married to someone who sees me as a genetic liability. Silence. No argument. No apology. Just silence. Maybe, for the first time, she finally understood how deep this cut. The divorce was finalized quietly. Friends and family started picking up bits and pieces, and the questions came rolling in. What happened? Is it true you two are splitting up? I didn't give them many details. I wasn't about to explain how my wife became obsessed with designer babies. Let her deal with that embarrassment herself. Lauren, on the other hand, didn't handle the social fallout as smoothly as she probably expected. I heard from mutual friends that people were talking, some subtly, some not so subtly. One guy at a party even joked, well, now you're free to find that Viking you've been dreaming about. Apparently, she didn't take that well. Good. Maybe it was time for her to face reality. Life after divorce. Weird. That's the only way to describe it. You get used to having someone around all the time and then suddenly it's just you. I moved into a small apartment. Just something temporary while I figured out my next steps. I stayed busy. Hiking, hitting the gym, hanging out with friends who didn't want to bring up Lauren. Dating? Didn't even cross my mind. I barely had the energy to think about relationships. I had to rebuild myself first. Some nights were rough, though. Lying awake at 2 a.m., my mind would drift back to all those fights. All those insane conversations. I'd start questioning everything. Could I have handled it differently? Did I overreact? But deep down, I knew the truth. Lauren wasn't the same woman I married. She let this obsession swallow her whole. And nothing I did could have changed that. And Lauren? I heard she wasn't doing great either. Apparently, she buried herself in work and cut off most of her social life. The social butterfly everyone knew had clipped her own wings. Maybe she was finally realizing that chasing perfection isn't all it's cracked up to be. She tried reaching out a few times. A couple of texts. Hey, can we talk? I've been thinking about everything. I never responded. I wasn't going back. I wasn't reopening wounds that were finally starting to heal. Sometimes I wonder, does she get it now? Does she realize how much she hurt me? How deep the damage really went? But you know what? That's not my problem anymore. I'm moving forward, one step at a time. And honestly, I feel lighter, free. No more twisted expectations. No more feeling like I had to compete with some fantasy of perfection. It's just me now, and that's more than enough.